Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for EBMUD's Landscape Advisory Committee, our general meeting, with a special presentation on protecting mature trees through lawn conversion projects. My name is Kristen Bowman, and I'm with EBMUD's Water Conservation Division. I'm here with my colleague, Lindsay Kinsler. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few logistics. This is recorded, so by participating, you do agree to be on a recorded webinar. You have access to the chat and the Q&A. And if you wouldn't mind using the Q&A to ask the presenters questions, in the chat you can use to share information amongst yourselves. We will be sending this out as a video and a hard copy presentation. We'll also be sending you some links to the resources that we talk about today. That will probably come out early next week. And I just wanted to comment a little bit about everyone who's attending, a lot of people from the Bay Area, but from all over California. And we know that about half of you kind of qualified yourself as beginners and the other half advanced and intermediate. And there's a little bit of something for everyone today. When we do get to the irrigation calculations, which is at the latter part of the presentation, for the beginners, we're just encouraging you to stay kind of big picture on it. And for the advanced folks, we will be sending you the slides so you can noodle around with some of the calculations on your own, and we look forward to hearing what you think about that. Let's see. So before we introduce the speakers, we just have a few announcements. So we have a number of Ruth Bancroft. We have a number of garden events coming up. One is the Ruth Bancroft Waterwise Garden Tour, and that's April 25th. And then we have Bring Back the Natives Garden Tour, which is May 2nd and 3rd. And in June, we have East Bay Public Gardens Open House. And that may be good if you're looking at converting some non-functional turf, because we'll have some large landscapes on that during the open house. You know, for our water supply, we're doing pretty good. The last time I looked, which was on Monday, our precipitation levels were about average for upcountry and locally at about 97%. So we always say water wisely, but we're looking pretty good this year for our water supply. Rebates, we have a couple new rebates. One is a tree bait, kind of along these lines of trees being important in our landscapes. So for commercial landscapes, it's up to $100 per tree. And then for 3 trees, and for residential, it's 1 tree. And those do need to be part of a lawn conversion project. We also have, for commercial property, a spring irrigation repair pilot. That's to go to really encourage you to get out there and do an irrigation audit before you turn on the irrigation for the season. And it's up to $1,000 per account. As a reminder, we do have landscape rebates up to $15,000 and a 5K bonus through the end of 2026 for commercial, and that's really to encourage non-functional turf conversions. And for residential, it's $2,000. So just as a reminder, I think many of you are familiar now with the non-functional turf watering ban, and that's only for commercial properties, and it's only with potable water. And starting in 2027, the law calls for municipalities to turn off their potable water by 2027, commercial, institutional 2028, HOAs 2029, and then disadvantaged communities by 2031, and as funding is available. So we hope everyone's kind of in the planning stage for this and looking at how to convert to sustainable landscapes to meet the demand of this new law. And also, just FYI, there's this really excellent website, nonfunctionalturfca.org. You kind of just easily remember that. And it has resources per sector. So if you're an HOA, or a commercial site, they have resources specifically geared for you. We also, EBMUD has our own webpage, and you can just Google EBMUD non-functional turf and it will bring you to that webpage. I want to let you know there's going to be a QR code here at the middle of the presentation, but I want to give you a heads up. Watershed Progressive is working with DWR and CalWeb to really do a mature tree health study throughout California. And they're looking at these lawn conversions and where mature trees have done really well over the long term. And so we've been doing this for a long time, right? Converting lawn for over 20 years. And so we want to find out where that really worked well, particularly with the mature trees. And so we'll be sending you a link and a QR code for that. And just as a reminder, CEUs are available for this webinar from Rescape, AWA, Master Gardeners, and Quell. How are you, Lindsay?
Today, we are fortunate to have both a certified arborist and an irrigation expert with us. First presenting will be our arborist, Darya Barar. Darya is a consulting urban forester and arborist with over 20 years of experience in municipal tree management and urban forestry planning. Today, she's going to be going over the benefits of planting trees, what the root protection zone is, do's and don'ts, and some mulch plant considerations and tips. Christine Hawkins is currently the specification manager for Northern California at Hunter Industries. She spends a lot of time collaborating with design professionals and municipalities on efficient irrigation systems. Today, she will be going over tree water demand, some irrigation scheduling calculations, and also a Excel spreadsheet that they put together, as well as some tips and best practices. So if possible, like we are today, work with both an arborist and a irrigation specialist when you're working with mature trees.
Thank you. And with
Hello, I'm Darya Barar. I am the Managing Consulting Arborist and Urban Forester at HortScience Bartlett Consulting. You can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. And actually the next one. All right, trees are often the most valuable plants in our landscape. They provide ecosystem benefits by way of cooling, air pollution reduction, carbon sequestration, while providing wildlife habitat for animals and birds. Trees beautify our landscapes. They improve mental and physical health. They encourage walkability in our landscapes. So trees are very important to our landscapes. Next slide, please. It's important to support our trees through landscape conversion. With landscape changes, impacts can be significant, and it's really best to understand your tree resource before beginning a project, and important to work with an arborist. Next slide, please. All right, two primary impacts can occur during landscape conversion. First, from the changes in frequency and duration of irrigation, and then also a primary impact from installing new landscapes and new irrigation systems. To reduce these impacts, it's really important to understand some of the basics of tree biology and tree preservation. Next slide, please. Tree protection largely focuses on maintaining enough of the root system to support a tree. Tree roots grow where conditions are most favorable, where they are moist, aerated, and fertile. Roots don't usually grow where soils are dry, compacted, or saturated. Trees have relatively shallow roots, far beyond the drip line oftentimes. And in my experience in the Bay Area, roots are predominantly in that first 18 inches of soil where conditions are most favorable. Where conditions are favorable though, woody roots can grow deeper than that, just it's unusual. The photo on the right-hand side is about 10 feet away from a mature coast redwood, and that's in Mountain View. That photo is taken in Mountain View. So you can see that even 10 feet away from a redwood, we're working with a different type of root than the roots that you'll see growing closer to the trunk. Next slide, please. All right, a critical root zone is often referred to, I hear that all the time, it's a common phrase that's used, and it is really the minimum volume of roots that's needed for tree stability. However, there's no universally accepted way to calculate it. And so I'm going to use a couple of different terms today, and I'll define them in the next couple of slides. But the tree protection zone is an area in which certain activities are prohibited, usually things like grading or just in general, certain types of excavation might be restricted or prohibited. And that's to minimize the potential injury to roots during projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first term that I'm going to use is the calculated, and these are both terms that are defined in the best management practice that was released in 2024, managing trees during site development and construction. The calculated tree protection zone is evaluated by using the species tolerance to construction, the relative age, and then multiplying that factor by the trunk diameter. So let's see how that works in reality. Next slide, please. All right, so if we take two different types of trees that are the same exact size in diameter, one coast live oak on the left-hand side and a black walnut on the right-hand side. We're going to go through how to calculate the tree protection, what the calculated tree protection zone is for each of those trees. Coast live oak has great tolerance to construction activities. So we're going to put that in the high species tolerance to construction damage. The tree is mature, so that gives us a multiplication factor of 8. So we're going to take the 20-inch diameter, multiply it by 8, which comes out to be 160. And then we're going to divide that to get to feet and inches by 12. That gives us a 13.33 foot diameter radius from the trunk of the tree out to the calculated tree protection zone. Now, for a 20-inch black walnut, which has poor tolerance to root impacts, we would use that, put that in the low category on the left-hand side there. And relative age is also mature, so it's a multiplication factor of 15. So 20 times 15 equals 300. 300 divided by 12 equals 25-foot radius from the trunk out to the calculated tree protection zone. Almost double the size based on its relative tolerance to construction impact. So really pay attention to what species you're working around and work with an arborist to determine what relative tolerance to construction activities that species has. All right, so a lot of places in California, next slide. A lot of places in California, you're going to look at me crazy because you're going to say, well, this tree is growing in the middle of a parking lot island. So what do you mean the calculated tree protection zone is 25 feet? There's sidewalk all around it, or there's, other facilities. Well, that is called the specified tree protection zone. So I would consider the specified tree protection zone to be the exposed soil area in this particular median island that I've circled here. The green circle on the bottom left of the screen indicates the calculated tree protection zone of those 3 trees that are in the parking lot island, and the exposed soil area is covered with a red hatch mark, which is noting where I had directed the contractors to place the tree protection fencing. So no work was going to happen within that red hatched area. Next slide, please. All right. And just a note on the zone of rapid taper. That's an area where tree buttress roots rapidly decline in size. You can really see that in the picture on the right-hand side of the screen there, where the where the roots go from the trunk out. You can really see that they go from 8 inches or so to 3 inches or so, just a few feet away. So that zone of rapid taper is usually around 5 feet from the trunk of the tree. It's very important to avoid damage damage to tree roots in that area. It helps trees to be able to resist wind throw. Basically, those are stabilizing roots, right? So we really want to try and avoid any kind of contact with those roots. Next slide, please. Root systems in cities are often quite different than those in natural environments because of the surrounding infrastructure and compacted or disturbed soils. And you can see that depicted here, where you have a lot of surface roots on the left-hand side, and curb and gutter has displaced the roots of this sweet gum on the right-hand side of the screen. Next slide, please. For landscape projects that don't involve any grading or construction, a suggested 5-foot radius TPZ for small trees is suggested, and a 10-foot TPZ for 10-foot radius TPZ for larger trees is suggested. And that's for projects without without excavation, trenching, or underground irrigation. Really try and avoid planting within that TPZ if at all possible. This protects that zone of rapid taper that we were just talking about on the previous slide. Next slide, please. Here we go. Converting turf to landscape typically causes water stress on trees because of the cessation of irrigation and the removal of roots during using a sod cutter or something like that. To avoid those kinds of root impacts, sheet mulching can be used, as well as hand tools to minimize root impacts. Next slide, please. Irrigate during turf conversion. Trees still need water even when turf is being removed and replaced with some other type of landscaping. It's important to hand water at a very slow rate for long periods of time rather than blowing those tree wells out with a watering truck or something like that. I've also seen multiple water bags being used at or as close to the drip line as possible is another way to really good way to irrigate, or using a temporary irrigation system during turf conversion is an excellent way to do things. Also try and avoid doing these turf conversions during the summer or periods of minimal rain is another really good way to avoid injury. Next slide, please. Digging trenches for irrigation lines near trees can often cause damage. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you see flags showing locations for future spray heads. Next slide, please. Helping to minimize that root injury, we can always use methods like tunneling under woody roots, right? So using hand tools to excavate that area and then leaving woody roots in place and placing irrigation lines underneath. We can keep the existing irrigation trenches and valve boxes outside of the tree protection zone, another really great method. We can leave irrigation for turf irrigation lines in place and then just modify for new plants is another good solution. And place irrigation lines on the top of the soil, covering with 3 or 4 inches of mulch. Next slide, please. Really try and avoid placing new plants within the tree protection zone. Placing them outside of the tree protection zone will minimize impacts to roots. Next slide. A few notes on irrigation. I know we're going to get more irrigation in a moment, but I'd really want to encourage folks to use drip irrigation systems. Place drip in contact with the soil where feeder roots are, so not close to the trunk, more out towards the drip line or as far away from the trunk as possible. Using 12-inch emitters with lines spaced 18 inches apart is best. And then place mulch on top so that that irrigation stays in the soil is best case scenario. Next slide, please. If you're using bubblers, place to irrigate the roots, not the trunk of the tree. Very important. I've heard that mulch can easily be washed away, so be cognizant of that when using bubblers. Also, schedule irrigation accordingly. Next slide, please. Spray irrigation. So spray irrigation, if you're going to be using spray irrigation, try and avoid runoff. There's a lot of runoff with spray irrigation, and avoiding that is always a good idea. Definitely try and avoid hitting the trunk of the tree. It is not good for the tree to have water hitting the trunk. Be cognizant of the fact that spray heads can often be clogged, and that causes lack of distribution of water and such other bad things. Next slide, please. When using mulch, I highly encourage folks out there to use arborist mulch. It's often free and can be picked up or delivered to spaces. Use the stuff that has leaves, twigs, mulch, larger pieces of wood, or even stump grindings. That type of mulch decomposes faster and not only leaves the soil healthier and aerated, but it also helps the tree's soil conditions over the long term. Really try to avoid using gorilla hair or wood chips. Wood chips don't really decompose. They take a long time to decompose, and so they don't help the soil to, they don't promote good soil health. And gorilla hair is hydrophobic, which means that water just it can't penetrate that area. So it's kind of like plastic, if you will. Next slide, please. In summary, trees provide many benefits. They are important to our landscapes. When working to convert your landscape from a heavily turf environment to something else, establish a tree protection zone and defend it. That may mean reviewing plans and working with an arborist. Irrigate according to the tree's needs to try and get the tree water where it's drinking and not at the root collar. Avoid burying that root collar, and use arborist mulch rather than other stuff. Thanks so much.
This one first. Okay. So thank you so much, Darya. And I really liked what you guys submitted in your registration, because it really cumulatively, you kind of hit all the points. And these are, similar to what Darya was just talking about, putting some time into creating a tree transition zone, sheet mulching and using wood mulch instead of rocks, hand digging around the root zone, avoid cutting major roots. Use tree protection fencing, protect the roots, avoid soil compaction, avoid hardscape near root balls, use a soaker hose, hydrozoning, so that's putting the trees on its own irrigation valve, water the trees, deep root watering, test the irrigation, use drip irrigation tree rings, slowly tailor watering schedule, avoid turf rotor spraying trunk and canopy, select appropriate understory, use wool culls, avoid overwatering new plantings near the drip line, a 6-foot radius around tree, native understory, and monitor the tree. So that's what you guys submitted, and I think it's a lot of what Darya was also talking about. So thank you for providing that. I also just want to let you know. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I see that there's a question in the chat about the estimated small versus large tree size and how you might
determine that.
I just want to say that it can be difficult to give a number because it depends on the species. Some trees grow really slowly, and therefore a smaller diameter would still mean it was a mature tree. So I hate to say contact an arborist, but it is helpful to do that. In general, something under 12 inches is probably going to be considered small. Something over 12 inches is in general going to be considered a larger tree. But definitely reach out to an arborist for more specific questions.
Is there another one?
Yes. And then Darya, we also have a question about native understory versus no planting.
Yeah, so any understory that's added in the tree protection zone or under trees or what have you is going to has the potential to cause root impact. So if you're digging those areas out using hand tools, it's probably okay. There will be minimal impact. However, there will be an impact just in the fact that you're going to be excavating in the soil to plant the plants. So minimize plantings in that area, and then definitely consider the shade factor as well as irrigation. So make sure that the trees irrigation needs match the plantings that you're planting, and then also make sure that the shade from the tree is going to match the needs of the plant that is being planted.
Okay, excellent. And then we have another question. If you could speak on specifically redwood trees and your experience in conversion projects with redwood trees.
Yeah, redwoods need a lot of water. So continually irrigating with potable water or high quality recycled water is very important with redwood. I've read somewhere that they need 100 gallons of water a day in the summertime. So a lot of moisture. Anyways, it's very important to irrigate redwoods. You need to continually be irrigating. So my experience is to just keep irrigating, and the redwoods may survive.
Great.
Have a higher likelihood of survival.
That's the last question.
Okay. And then we're just going to address one more question before we move on. There's a question about how do we suggest that CII customers irrigate their trees when they have to stop sprinkler irrigation in the surrounding non-functional turf? So this is a kind of interpreted in different ways, but my understanding of the law is if you have mature trees in the turf area, you can continue to irrigate your trees. So we highly recommend that you do so. I will open that up if others have some comments on that, because I know even Kristen and I sometimes might interpret that a little differently. So the understanding of the law is if you have mature trees that are only irrigated by that turf irrigation, you can continue to irrigate to keep your trees alive.
Yeah, the situation on that is that you're going to be changing your irrigation to support the tree, which isn't necessarily going to be what the lawn wants. And so your lawn will probably just die anyway. And so it's best to just hydrozone and get your tree prepared for its own irrigation and then a new understory, because eventually that's where you're going to end up. I wanted to bring this survey to your attention. So this is, we're doing the art and science here. We're building this information on how to be sure to support our mature trees as we go through these lawn conversions. And the Department of Water Resources is working with CalWEP and Watershed Progressives to collect information on this. And if you have examples of mature trees that have been in a lawn conversion like 5 or so years ago, this would be a good survey. It's just 3 minutes, just a few questions to help them gather that information in some case studies. I'll also send this out as part of the follow-up link. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on to irrigation. And welcome back, Christine Hawkins and Chris McNairy.
Hi there. Thanks so much. Great to be here today. Sorry, my camera just cut off the top of my head there. Hello, everybody. My name is Christine Hawkins. I'm with Hunter Industries, and I am going to be talking to you about how to schedule your irrigation today. I think it's really essential as we talk about irrigation and the success in trees to make sure that we are, once we put all the infrastructure, the hardware in, that we're scheduling it properly. It can be a big way that systems fail and that trees can get a lot of stress after turf removal. I'm being joined today by Chris McNairy. Chris is going to be in the background today. He's going to be answering the Q&A because we anticipate there being a lot of questions around irrigation. So he's kindly agreed to be in the background and help us with answering your irrigation questions as we move through our talk today. And we're also joined by one of our new representatives. Kelly Lau is new in our area. So welcome, Kelly. We're very excited to have you with us and able to contribute as you feel comfortable. So real quick, when we're looking at irrigation systems, let me get through my slides here and get to there. The challenge really becomes that existing calculators use inches rather than volume when they calculate irrigation. They rely on that canopy and root area to be an equivalent square footage. And the result is a frequency and duration that, while matched to square footage, might not be relevant to your site conditions. For example, here's how irrigation frequency might occur. And for those of you not expert in irrigation, frequency means what days of the week we irrigate, how many days in between an irrigation cycle occurs. And that frequency is decided here by what's called a water holding capacity, root zone, and ETO, all given in a depth measurement of inches or feet. And the same thing with our duration. And duration, for those of you, again, not familiar with irrigation, might be called our runtime. So it's how many minutes a certain zone or valve may run on those days which it irrigates. And again, that is given by ET and precip rate, that is inches and not dependent on square footage. And that is something that looks like this. It assumes that in average, the size of the canopy and the size of the root zone are about the same. And for the most part, that's perfectly adequate. It comes from decades of agricultural engineering and landscape plant management, where that has been perfectly adequate for our needs. But what we're really running into with turf removal situations is trees, as Darya showed us, that have grown into the situation that was available to them. And that could mean that it's a really big tree in a little pot, right? So think, like a green roof, or some of those places in parking lots where it just is basically in its own little tiny pot, but this canopy, this huge shading canopy we love so much, has really outgrown that space. Or it might be in a case like where it has been, looks like a fairly normal tree, but because of underlying hardscape, it isn't able to get those deep roots that we see in nature. And so oftentimes this is very common in turf because that tree is getting watered very frequently in very small amounts. So the water never penetrates fully deeply into that soil, and those roots stay where the moisture is in that upper layer of soil. And that's why Darya said our root zones tend to be anywhere from 6 to 18 inches deep. Not very deep according to what nature might have preferred. And what that looks like in real life is this. I was down visiting some family down South Bay, and literally made a diversion and parked to take a picture of this, because this is what we see in a lot of our environments. We see a tree that may or may not be a little bigger than it should be. We see turf that really isn't serving a purpose anymore. And we see an irrigation system that needs a little enhancement. And we see that this tree has a great deal of root space. There's that flare that Darya said you don't want to plant on and around, and that's why this is a great shot. But you also see some areas that are suffering, probably because of wear and tear and just an aged landscape. So when you renovate this, how do you start to think about irrigating a tree like this? And when we talk about schedule, again, we're going to talk about frequency and duration. And we're doing this because we're going to be provided with this spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet was created to kind of illustrate the volume of water and how we apply that water for trees. So as we're going through today and doing a bunch of math, don't worry about writing it all down. You're going to get this spreadsheet. It has the same exact math in it, and you can plug and play your numbers into there for your particular site. So when we're looking at a schedule, we want to know irrigation frequency and duration post-turf removal. And this doesn't have to do with that protected root zone. This is after the construction's been done and we're on to the maintenance phase. We need to know our irrigation supply, how many gallons are supplied by that irrigation. We need to know how many gallons are stored in the tank of soil that we have available to us and the size and characteristics of that soil. And we need to know how much water that plant demands, how much water that tree needs. So starting with our demand here in the state of California, we're super lucky to have our ET or evapotranspiration rates given to us by the CIMMYS network. CIMMYS provides a spatial analysis that you can get an ETO or a reference ET for your general location by zip code or by station. And we're going to use that number and the canopy size of a tree to get to a number to how many gallons of irrigation I need to apply. Evapotranspiration in our state is given in inches over day or month or year. According to the UCANR slide scheduling method, trees in California are going to use 0.5 or 50% or half of that reference ET. Those of you that are new to this, don't worry, there's a lot of explanation available in the documents you're going to get later. Those of you who are professionals, you're going to wonder, well, why is my 0.5 adequate for my oak and my redwood? And that is because the UCANR research decided that in the urban environments that our trees exist, we can use 0.5 of ET safely for our trees, regardless of species. So for this particular example, I chose a zone number 10, and that's the valley right here. It's a beautiful area, a lot of agriculture in that area, and a lot of challenging water conditions. For that area, our peak ET in July is 8 inches. We can get a daily ETO of 0.26 inches, just dividing that by 31. But because I only need half of that, I know that my tree needs 0.13 inches per day. What does that mean, 0.13 inches? Well, it depends again on that canopy size. If I have a canopy size that is larger, it is going to require more gallons. Same inches, more gallons. And how do I get to that? Using a simple area calculation. A is pi r squared. Area is pi times radius squared. We use canopy size as a general landscape water requirement calculations, even if it is a conical versus a shrubby versus a leafy tree, because again, that UCANR slide method has said that rough canopy size is adequate for measuring ET or water need for that tree. Some of you might be saying, well, my tree's leafier than somebody else's, so it needs more water. And while technically they may be true, we can use something called leaf area index modeling for that. It is not a science that's accessible to us in the CII environment. So leaf area index, deciding how many leaves are in our tree and using that for detailed hydrological modeling is something that scientists do for forestry and other management. But for us in the lowly landscape field, we're going to use simple canopy size. So for our particular tree that needs 0.13 inches per day, if I have a 10-foot diameter tree, I need 6.4 gallons per day. Again, I'm not going to go through the math on this. These slides will be available to you, and you can go through that on the spreadsheet or on your own if you like. If you're really into math, you might want to calculate it by hand on your own. But some of us, even if put things into a spreadsheet, it just makes it a lot faster, a lot friendlier. So now I know that I have a tree that in my peak season, which here in the state of California is July. July is smart irrigation month. It's the month we use the most water. We need 6.4 gallons per day. But I can't just give it 6.4 gallons every day because I have to look at the storage. The storage is how much water I'm holding in my soil. And soil, gosh, I could talk for hours about soil. Soil is so important because soil needs not only water, but air. And so what you want to do when you're irrigating is you always want to water deep and infrequent. And the importance of deep is, again, those roots are going to grow where there's moisture, and we want them deeper. Deeper means that they can survive stresses like drought, temporary heat, storm surges, and things like that with greater strength. Infrequent means that we're allowing their air-water exchange to happen. We're allowing that soil to dry out and draw air into that soil biome. And really that air-oxygen, that air and moisture exchange is just as important to the root. Remember, Darya said moist soil, not soggy soil. So we need that exchange of air and water. So we talk about soils with water holding capacity, and different kinds of soils have what's based on the soil type have a different water holding capacity. And we're going to talk about the scientific terms of soils, understanding that in our urban environment, we might not have that exact particular type of soil. You could do a jar test, you can kind of see what soil you've got, But in general, if you've had a lawn on top of it, if it's been mown and mulch has been dropped on, those clippings have been dropped off, hopefully you have a good amount of organic material in that soil. But if you've scraped that soil back as you've removed that turf, you might have less organic matter in that soil, so lower water holding capacity. So take this with a bit of a grain of salt. The calculations we're doing today are a budget number that you're then going to modify by site conditions and observation. We need to know how much soil we're dealing with. Not only the inches of depth, as in our previous calculations, but the area that we're irrigating. Because really remember, with those trees in urban areas, their root zone could be severely impacted by infrastructure, by construction. It could be opened up. Maybe we've removed sidewalks and asphalt and pavement, and we've really opened up that area. Or maybe it's been closed off. We've added some elements, and so we're reducing that area, that soil area. Again, according to UCANR's slide method, we're going to do something called managed allowed depletion of 0.5. And that means that my soil can hold a whole bunch of water, but I'm going to wait until half of it is evaporated before I irrigate again. And that is considered by their method adequate for that air-water cycle that we talked about earlier. Water holding capacity of different soil types varies, and it's generally given in total available water of inches per feet. I've calculated gallons available water per cubic foot just for today's conversation, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. Something like a coarse sand, folks that are on the coast, you have a 0.6 or inches per foot, or about a third of a gallon per cubic foot of moisture content holding ability. But if you are in a place with a deep clay, maybe you have a really heavy soil, you're going to have almost 5 times more water holding capacity in that soil. And if in some lovely land you happen to live on a peat farm, I don't think any of us in California are going to be suffering from too much peat in our soil, you can really see how that moisture content increases. And that's going to impact how frequently we irrigate. We don't want to overwater, we don't want to underwater. In order to do the math on that, you take your root zone, determine what area you're going to irrigate. Again, we might not be able to irrigating just under the drip line. We might not be irrigating 100% of that drip line. We might be irrigating beyond that drip line. We might have avoided that flare area, or we might be influenced by a parking lot area and we're only going to get this many square feet. For your particular site, evaluate how many square feet are going to be available for you to be irrigating. Right? We're not talking just everywhere that tree root might exist. We're talking about that tree root area that we can impact. Get that area, multiply it by that depth of water holding capacity, and that 7.48 is just how many gallons there are per cubic foot. Watch your units. And for this particular example, we're going to use a 15-foot diameter area, 12 inches deep, right? 12 inches right between that 6 to 18 inches that Darya finds that most roots exist. We're going to give ourselves a loamy sand. It's a nice, great 2 inches water holding capacity per foot. Not all of us are going to have that high or that amount of water holding capacity, but we can start mid-range and adjust as field conditions persist. You can do the math on that, and we can see that in that soil profile, it might hold 220 gallons of water. But I want to make sure that I allow 110 gallons from evapotranspirative losses before I irrigate again. So now I know that I need 6.4 gallons per day. I have the ability, or I need to wait until I've used 110 gallons. So how often and how frequent do I need to water? Well, it's going to depend on my irrigation system. It's going to depend on what we usually call a precipitation rate. But what I'm going to encourage you to look at instead for today is our flow rate. So precipitation rate is inches per hour. That's something we very commonly use to schedule our irrigation systems. But in this particular case, where we're trying to get a volumetric irrigation, flow rate is a more appropriate measurement. Once we know those, we can determine our frequency and duration of our irrigation schedule, determined by that water demand and allowed depletion we talked about earlier, and modified by site observation and management. You might have a couple of different irrigation types out there. And trust me, I could talk again for hours about all of the irrigation out there. You've been encouraged to use drip. You might be using an existing system, for instance, if you do have the shrub and the tree kind of combined. Whatever irrigation system you're using, I guarantee you can figure out a flow rate. For our particular example today, flow rate can be either based on manufacturer's spec, right? You can get that from any manufacturer's catalog, or you can measure it from a flow sensor or a submeter if you have one on site. Since MWELO has been here for so long, flow sensors are more common than they used to be. And certainly if you're on an East Bay mud connection, you definitely have at least a water meter, if not a sub-meter for your site. I encourage you to find it, get friendly with it. It's going to be your friend through this process. If you'd rather calculate it, if you have drip emitters, you're hopefully doing them on a grid spacing. This is really tough to do with things like soaker hose because there's no really definitive flow rate for those or precip rate. You would have to have a flow sensor on that to determine how much water is going out of that hose. But for professional drip products, you're going to have that information. The flow for the zone is a function of your emitter flow rate, so 0.4, 0.6, 0.9 gallons per hour, the area in square feet that you're irrigating, and that emitter spacing and emitter row spacing. For this particular example, I've tightened it up a little bit from Darya's presentation. I'm using the 0.6 gallon per hour emitters, spaced 12 inches, but I'm putting those rows also at 12 inches. I like to keep it a little higher. My area is a 15-foot diameter, and I can calc out 1.8 GPM. This is a really good exercise to do even if you have a flow sensor, because you can compare that number to the number you're getting through your flow sensor and see kind of how correct it is. And you can find a lot of leaks and breaks and issues with your system that way if you are having issues. So we know that we're getting water at a rate of 1.8 gallons per minute. So when we're doing an irrigation schedule, you're going to ask me right now, usually people are asking me, well, why don't I use a soil sensor, right? Why don't I use a soil moisture sensor on the system? Well, I would refer you back to that first picture with all of the roots in there. Even if you had one available, it is very difficult to install them in existing landscapes without significant disturbance to those roots, and isn't really going to be necessary or helpful because it's one sensor point in an entire field of soil that can have differing conditions. So you'll still need to do that monitoring and management. You also want to do this calculation because you are going to need to create a base schedule for many sensors. You're going to need to create a base July schedule that you can then reduce as you go through the year and have a reduction in water use. So for our frequency decision, we know that we want to use up 110 gallons. We're going to use it up at a rate of 6.4 gallons per day. So we say, all right, well, that means every 17 days, I'm going to use up my allowed depletion in that soil. And here's another little tricky thing. Most of our irrigation systems are designed to operate on a weekly schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Saturday, whatever your restrictions might be or your current maintenance schedule might have. And so most controllers are going to have that embedded in their system. So as a user, you might not have available to you a frequency setting or interval setting of 17 days. Maybe you do, maybe you have some higher end controller. A lot of us don't. And so what you might choose is an interval that is more commensurate with a weekly schedule. So in this case, once every 2 weeks, we want to irrigate this system. Knowing that my frequency now is chosen to be 14 days and my daily requirement is 6.4 gallons per day, it's a super easy calculation to get my total gallons required of 90. Divide that by my 1.8 gallons per minute I'm supplying, and it comes out to 50 minutes. So in this particular example, my schedule is going to water every 14 days for 50 minutes. What could change that? Well, that's a really good question. When we go to look at this Excel sheet, again, this Excel sheet is for demonstration purposes only. Some of the things we have not talked about today are runoff potential. You might need to soak and cycle your system in order to avoid runoff. You might have leaching requirements if you're using reclaimed water, non-potable water. You might want to rinse those salts out through the soil. We're not looking at irrigation efficiency today because it's really hard to judge an irrigation efficiency if we don't know what the site is we're looking at. Drip is highly efficient when used properly. And we're not considering water budget restraints. So if you have any restrictions on day or time of water that you're allowed to use on your site, it can vary by municipality. This is not something that calculator is doing. This calculator is simply a raw calculation to tell you how much water that tree is likely needing and how frequently you're going to be able to put it down. For our first example right here from our PowerPoint in column D, you can see we have that 12-inch root depth, our MAD of 0.5, our peak ET of 0.26. We've modified it by our canopy diameter and plant factor, as well as our irrigation system. And it gets us down to this 17 days every 62 minutes. I have a user set frequency of 14 days. So every 14 days, I'm going to water for 51 minutes, right? That's my peak water need. If I've decided to water weekly, I'm going to water for just under half an hour. What I did here is I set this system to increase in interval, right? So we're applying the same amount of water, but we're increasing the interval because hopefully over time, your tree is going to adapt to not having those shallow roots up at the top at that root zone where the turf was. And over time, we're hoping that tree is going to be able to develop newer roots and get a little bit more deep. And as it gets deeper, as my soil volume increases, my MAD is going to increase and my frequency is going to increase. And I can water hopefully less frequently and more deeply. This is what the calculation looks like. So those first calculations modified to account for volume instead of just depth. This gives me my frequency. And then duration by volume again, modified by flow rate rather than just by inches of precipitation rate. Again, not modified for efficiencies. You can do that if you like. We find, however, that when you are irrigating a volume of soil, that moisture, that capillary action, the deeper you go, tends to even out that application, as long as you aren't getting a lot of runoff. So kind of the last things to remember here is expect trees to suffer more in drought conditions, because that volume of soil is its safety net, it's its security blanket. And if that's dried up and then we hit a drought, extra high ET rates, extra low water holding or available water in the soil, that's where we start to see a lot of stress in trees. And so if you're doing turf removal, oftentimes it happens during drought years, you could have exacerbated symptoms that may have taken years to develop. So it's really important to remember you need to properly hydrate that entire soil profile prior to these massive renovations. Make sure you're giving the tree the best chance it possibly has. Use this calculator and make sure you are getting that volume of irrigation down through your root zone. And then expect to allow your plants to recover slowly. You can talk to an arborist about what that healthy tree may look like, what you can expect in stress. Does their pruning going to help? As we're pruning the roots, should we prune the top? Has that tree overgrown its particular location? Is it time to remove and replace? Really expect these plants. They are big, I want to say creatures, but it's a tree, not a creature. Big forms, and they're going to take time. Those big rooty roots developed in place, we're not going to be able to move those. We're just hoping to get some more fine roots down below. And the real key to success is site observations. We can talk in generic terms about water budgeting and about generally what it should look like, but your site is really going to be particular to whatever situation you're encountering. And you need to manage these adjustments over time. So we want you to do a little math, use a soil probe, get down into that soil, see what it looks like, and investigate and adjust based on current conditions. For instance, we had 2 weeks ago hail, and now I'm looking out at a 75-degree day, right? So our weather can be a little all over the place, especially in spring and fall. And what's really careful about those seasons is that's when the soil is cool enough and warm enough to promote root growth. Roots aren't growing in the peak of summer or the depths of winter. They're growing in those shoulder months, those shoulder seasons. So make sure that they have proper hydration in order so that they have the strength to do that kind of photosynthesis. These are the kinds of soil probes I'm talking about. If you don't have a core soil probe like this, any pokey thing will do. And so with the unique things about soil, you could take even like a steel that you use for honing your kitchen knives. And we go to Goodwill and find a honing steel, and you take that and you stick it into the ground. It will stop when it hits dry soil. So if you're only able to penetrate 2 inches into that soil, guess what? You haven't gotten the moisture level down far enough. However, if you put that probe in and you sink all the way to the hilt and there's a muddy sucking sound when you pull it out, you've probably overwatered and you're not getting that good air-water exchange. So there's nothing like a soil probe that can really give you some information about the health of your soil and how well you are doing as an irrigator. It's really important to go and check right before and right after an irrigation day. So thank you so much. It looks like there's been some Q&A popping up as I've been going back and forth. I haven't been tracking that. Are there any questions that haven't been answered that I can help out with?
Looks like we have a question about discussing inline drip versus emitter drip.
Can you read the question out for me?
It says, please discuss inline drip versus emitter drip.
That is the question.
So, yeah, that's always a fun question.
Sure. So emitter line is it's this brown line that's here on the screen. And that means that it is a tube in which the emitters are embedded into it. So all you see is a little hole out the top that the water comes out of. Drip emitters or point source emitters, there are a line, there's a tube that you poke emitters into, and then you can use 1/4-inch tubing to go wherever the root ball is. There's pros and cons to both. I prefer inline drip because we are trying to keep an entire area moist. So it is a really good thing to use when you have a mass planting or a massive tree zone. I worked with City of Ventura years and years and years ago. They had a big magnolia tree at their city hall and it was suffering. And so they took all that turf away from it. It must have been a 50 or 60-foot canopy. The thing was massive and it had root flare about 20 feet out. And so they took all of the soil away from it and they corded it off so people couldn't walk on it and used drip tubing, just like this, used big circles of it and irrigated it deeply because it was in a very sandy soil situation out there near the coast. Irrigated it very deeply and it really brought that tree back to health because it was an entire area we're irrigating. Point source emitters, the kinds where you poke them into a tubing, are really great for areas where you have specialized water needs and you aren't trying to get an entire area uniformly moist. So it might be a really good idea to use those. Like I grew up in Tucson where a landscape is one plant every 20 or 30 feet, right? And so we're not going to irrigate all of that 20 or 30 feet between those plants. We're going to put point source emitters just where the plant is located and irrigate those. So a real different application, pros and cons to both, depending on your site conditions. I hope that was helpful.
Did you want to read Brandon's? Just read it or?
Yeah. Yeah, and then we just have a comment from Brandon. He says, we suggest 1 inch of water per week at summer peak. Once you know your precip rate, type of sprinkler, it goes pretty easy. 1 inch divided by precip rate times 60 minutes. This gets you close to weekly water needs, break up the long runs, use cycle and soak, and apply water once a week if able to. Don't know if you have any comments, Christine, or?
1 inch of water per week is dependent on your location, right? So 1 inch of water per week in San Francisco is a lot. And in Fresno, it's not nearly enough. So it really depends on where you're at. I'm not sure where Brandon's located, and it depends on what you're irrigating. If you're irrigating a tree that only needs to be watered every 2 or 3 weeks, doing it 1 inch every week is not going to help it get those deep roots that we're looking for. But if you're looking at something like a higher water use, herbaceous or perennial bed, then maybe it does need that, and it maybe needs it broken up into little chunks. So again, your situation is going to vary.
I think this is a question for Darya. Can you say why rock cobbles are not good under tree canopies?
Rocks stop healthy soil from forming, right? So that first couple of layers of soil, there's a lot of water that penetrates, and that percolating water slowly leaves air pockets in the soil. When there's a rock there, it stops the moisture from percolating into the soil, and those air pockets are not left behind, which means that the soil gets compacted over time and doesn't allow moisture to penetrate. Moisture actually moves up and down in the soil, and so moisture can as it's percolating, doesn't just go down; it sometimes goes up, and that those air pockets are also left in the soil, so that the rocks on the surface of the soil will stop that from happening.
There can also be a pretty big heat impact too.
Yeah.
Yes, a huge heat impact. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, awesome job, you guys. Just really see how amazing it is to combine the arborist with the irrigation specialists. And, you know, we hope that that's what you can do for your larger projects. But if not, this is a little bit of some information you'd be thinking about, you know, big picture to plan ahead, protect your trees, definitely irrigate. We hear stories of people just going in and like willy-nilly crossing their fingers and maybe putting a hose right next to the trunk. like that is a practice that happens. So we're trying to move away from that and, integrate some of these best practices, because we definitely want to keep our mature trees as we're going through these lawn conversions. And we look forward to learning more about your successes through this process. And so we'll be sending you that survey for those of you that have those situations and want to talk about it. But I think we got through all the questions. And so until the next time, thank you so much to the presenters.
Thank you.
Yeah.